Good evening. This is Wednesday, August 13th, 83 days until the 2008 presidential election. As war rages tonight in Georgia, Russia's invasion of that tiny U.S. ally is raising new questions, not just about the wisdom and the competence of John McCain's foreign policy, but also about the integrity and the ethics that shaped his position toward Russia. McCain's position may, in fact, have helped fuel this crisis. It certainly today left a foreign head of state making an extraordinary appeal for help from a capital virtually under siege and calling McCain out by name for not matching deeds to words. Our fifth story tonight, the price for McCain's foreign policy, possibly in this case a literal price. Did the nation of Georgia think it had bought John McCain? His rebuke at the hands of that nation's leader presently. First, today's new details about McCain's top foreign policy advisor. On April 16th, Russia announced it would establish legal ties with Georgia's two separatist regions, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, both friendly with Russia, legitimizing them, a move widely seen as undermining Georgia's sovereignty there. The next day, the Washington Post now reports, Georgia sought help, agreeing to pay $200,000 to a lobbying firm headed by this man, Randy Schuneman, to renew its contract with Schuneman, who is also and was also at the time McCain's top foreign policy advisor. That same day, Schuneman participated in crafting a strong statement by McCain, taking Georgia's side, telling reporters, quote, "We must not allow Russia to believe it has a free hand." Did statements like that, purchased or not, give Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili the confidence to launch his military offensive in South Ossetia last Thursday? Did it, in turn, become Russia's excuse for invading Georgia? Over the years, Georgia has paid Schuneman's firm $800,000. Schuneman's company, the Associated Press reports today, has lobbied McCain and his staff on Saakashvili's behalf 49 separate times. With his capital under siege today, Saakashvili spoke like a man left with only a receipt. Asked about the U.S. response or lack thereof, he used the word appeasement and put at least partial blame for the crisis itself on President Bush.
Well, frankly, some of the first statements from Washington were perceived by the Russians almost as a green light for doing this, because they were too soft.
More startling by far, Saakashvili's criticism of McCain, arising unsolicited following his alarming account of what Georgians have found inscribed on Russian bombs.
The bombs that they dropped on us, some of them got unexploded. This is for President Bush, this is from the United States, this is for NATO. And that's what the people, Russians are fighting. This is not war with us. They are by proxy trying to fight war with the West. And the West seems to be, believing about that. But certainly I think I really want to appeal. I mean, yesterday I heard Senator McCain said, we are all Georgians now. Well, very nice and, very cheering for us to hear that. But of course, it's time to pass from deeds to, from words to deeds.
And what deeds does Saakashvili want? With Russia claiming to honor a ceasefire, Georgia is asking the U.S. to provide peacekeepers, something the Europeans have agreed to, but the U.S., Bush, McCain have not. Mr. Bush instead sending humanitarian aid by air and by sea, transported by U.S. troops. Some of that aid has already arrived, although the only ship to bring aid, the USS Comfort, is now in Baltimore and will not arrive for more than a month. This only one element of a response critics are calling Katrina-esque, with Bush only just back from the Olympics and now merely delaying his Crawford vacation by a day or two to deal with this. And Saakashvili today saying Western intelligence predicted Russia would not invade. And with the Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, only today heading towards the region after continuing her vacation through the Russian invasion. The Obama campaign has also criticized McCain's response, specifically the belligerence of his recent rhetoric. Today, McCain responded that this is no time to politicize the matter, even when it was pointed out that he and his surrogate Joe Lieberman did exactly that just yesterday.
Barack Obama and John McCain's statements, Senator Lieberman said one had kind of a moral neutrality to it. That comes, I think, from inexperience. The other, Senator McCain, was strong and clear. That seems a little political to some now.
Well, let me respond by just saying that I think that whatever we think at the moment, that we can all reserve that for a future time.
The question from Fox News, by the way. With us tonight, MSNBC political analyst Jonathan Alter, also, of course, senior editor at Newsweek and author of the new book, Between the Lines. Welcome, as always, John.
Thanks, Keith.
Does it seem that Georgia's president thought Bush, or maybe more directly McCain, were supposed to prevent exactly what happened from happening?
Yeah, you got the sense that Saakashvili thought there should be a tripwire there, like there was during the Cold War in Western Europe, and that if the Russians crossed that we would go to war, to defend them. It reminds me a little bit of the confusion that happened in the 1950s. In 1956, the Hungarians revolted, and they had reason to believe that the Eisenhower administration had given them assurances that we would intervene there. What they don't understand in that part of the world is that Americans really don't want to get into a shooting war with the Russians. And this is something that is suddenly like now on the table for us to have to think about whether this could take place in the next few years if John McCain's elected.
So that's Saakashvili in the Imre Nagy role, I guess, from 1956. Right. But legally or morally, is there any culpability here with McCain, or now in this construction more directly with this advisor, Mr. Schoeneman?
Well, culpability I would shy away from. I mean, the Russians did a bad thing.
Yes.
They really should not have done this, and I'm not into the idea of sort of blame shifting for their bad behavior. But I do think it is really unseemly that Randy Schnurman, had this lobbying contract. It's always the second raters, by the way, who are foreign agents or lobbying for foreign governments. The top foreign policy people do it in a more subtle way. Maybe they're consultants, but they're not lobbyists. So this really stinks, this whole deal of him, because you don't know who's he representing. Is he representing the interests of Georgia or the interests of the United States? And you never want to get into a situation like that. And it's rather, I'd hate to say it, inexperienced maybe on John McCain's part to be putting up with this kind of thing. And also there's the question of whether in his rhetoric toward Putin, he's just been too inflammatory for American interests.
And but that draws that line there. We get oil through Georgia. The oil money in Georgia subsidizes Schoeneman's lower paying work, which is as a McCain policy advisor. McCain's foreign policy loudly supports Georgia and has since April in the run up to all of this. How does McCain even theoretically argue that those dots are not connected?
Well, I mean, I think he would say that, he's been to Georgia a few times. He did nominate Saakashvili for a Nobel Prize, Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. Even though he seems like a good supporter of the West, I'm not quite sure where the Peace Prize part of it would come in. But I'm not sure that he needed his advisor here to be so strongly pro-Georgian. He was going in that direction anyway. The question, though, is one of subtlety and moderation in one's approach to foreign policy. He's supposed to be the adult here, the mature foreign policy statesman. Those are the grounds on which he's asking us to elect him president. These are not well-tempered, measured remarks that he's been making. He should have taken a little bit of a leaf, I think, from the administration, which, despite some of its miscues, at least responded with the right tone to this crisis.
Unless Senator McCain has his own army that he's not telling us about, that he can send over to actually intervene personally right now rather than, say, in January.
We're supposed to only have one president at a time, which is something he might have forgotten this week.
I believe I heard him say that at some point. MSNBC political analyst Jonathan Alter, Between the Lines, is out now. It collects some of John's Newsweek work. Thanks, as always, for coming in.
Thanks.